So Arn at some point decides he wants to see what is out there, and he doesn't believe that there's nothing. Like some of his friends and family on the island just don't believe there's anything beyond Rosette. That's the whole world to them. So he decides to set off to Skoa, in order to at least disprove that there's, he can see an island on the horizon, and he's like, there's got to be something there. So he sets off and goes to Skoa. So if you take a read of that Arn 30 chapter, I'll send the link. Or you can just jump down to a specific spot. Basically, he's trying to survive on Skoa after landing there. He had a really rough landing. He destroyed his face on some rocks when the tide crashed him against them, because they're not a seafaring people yet. And so he's trying to survive. He's having a real rough time. And then just as this happens, one of those cats attacks him. And he's like trying to heal up, and then he has to fight this creature to the death because he's been found, and it just sees him as prey. And so this maybe is why no one returned from Skoa. There's also some locals on Skoa that don't know about the locals on Rosat, and they've never, they've only crossed paths a couple times in history. So he's stuck on this island with tons of danger, and then gets attacked by this creature. So if you guys want, if you want a more detailed description of this creature, it should be in there, somewhere, or at least what it would be like to fight one. And I think, it looks like he drifts in and out of consciousness at some points here. Arn is quite an interesting storyline. But yeah, eventually I'll get a page for the creatures up on the wiki here. We don't even have a category for animals yet. All right, moving back over to magic. Teleportation. Unlike most forms of magic, teleportation seems to have its own rules and quirks. It's also unclear. Yeah, no worries. It's also unclear. Ooh. Roll tables, not sure how interested you are in them, but they are great. Okay, cool. Yeah, I did see the one about roll tables. I'll look that up more information sometime. Cool. Yeah, sounds good. So do you the favor of rolling? Did you want to do that's for if Nayar has magic? Is what you were asking about? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's do it. So we'll head back over to World of Gethra in this time period. Does Nayar have magic? So the odds that I have for magic is a 1 in 8. Cool, yeah. And that's kind of that's based on the odds of any people in this society having magic. That doesn't mean that 1 in 8 people are magicians, because as I noted, many people go through life without learning that they're magicians. However, the odds I've decided of whether you're born with it or not is based on that. So here we go, 1 to 8. So if I roll a 1, Lord Nayar does have magic, and if I roll a 2 to 8, he does not. Ah, there you go. So he does not. Hope that's okay. Some people are sad they're not magicians. Some people don't want to be magicians. So awesome. All right. It's also unclear how humans learned to teleport. Actually, it might be more relevant before I dive on further into teleportation here. Okay, cool. So yeah, so I'll add on here as well, sensing magic. While magicians are not able to sense the use of magic around them, they can sense if someone has the potential or gift of magic through touch. So that's one of the main ways that, for example, I said 1 in 8 people are born with magic. But how would you find out that you're a magician if you didn't have some sort of vision or dream that led you to think maybe I'm a magician? So the question then is, how would anyone find out that they're a magician? Well, the existing magicians can sense that. So sometimes there might be a powerful lord who wants to know if he's a magician. He would send for a magician to come and just lay his hand on him and find out if he's a magician. For a commoner, that's probably not going to be an option because you're not going to have enough wealth to hire someone to come and tell you. You could maybe go to a magician and just say, please let me know. And some magicians would, and some wouldn't. Another thing, though, is magicians that are recruiting. So a magician who wants to teach an apprentice or wants to have an order, maybe they're starting off a new guild or something like that, they might just offer to find out who is a magician, or they might be seeking magicians. Particularly if you're going to train an apprentice, you probably want to start with a younger person, so you might be going and looking for children who have the gift of magic. And then you end up with a similar kind of trope to, in a lot of fantasy, the wiser wizard coming in and finding a new magician to impart his knowledge to. It's also unclear how humans learn to teleport. Upon initiating a teleportation spell, magicians will vanish from their current location. It will then take a certain amount of time to arrive at their destination. Though they cannot be harmed during this period of absence. During their absence, all right, the duration of their absence is based on the actual time it would take to complete that journey. Or actually, I should say it would have taken. This isn't just a ratio of travel time or distance, but rather based on some cosmic understanding of what would have happened had they not disappeared. Yes, I will make an example because that certainly helps. For example, actually I should say the duration of their absence is based on the actual time it would have taken, on usually around 75% of that time. For example, if a magician wished to travel from city A to city B, and that journey would take 4 weeks, they could teleport there and arrive 3 weeks later, or 3 weeks from their departure. However, if they had not teleported and were fated to encounter a dear friend and journey instead to city C, it might be that many months pass before they would end up at city B. This can lead to teleportation that takes far longer than expected, and one of the reasons that only experienced magicians will use teleportation. Unpredictable as it is, teleporting is still preferable to death. You don't know necessarily when you're going to reappear, but probably better than dying. So death. We'll also say these risks can be mitigated somewhat by magicians training themselves in focus. If a magician... yeah, so we'll circle back to that in a second as well. These risks can be mitigated somewhat by magicians training themselves in focus. If a magician... I might need to break this up into a few points. It's getting a little... Oh, oops. All right, I'll have to look into if I can make a layered or tiered list in a minute. But if a magician... Yeah, it's also already led to some really interesting stories when a magician wanted to get somewhere within a certain amount of time and failed because they had to teleport, or someone who had to choose between, I might not die, but if I teleport, I'll definitely be gone for a long time, but I am at risk. Like there's a lot of variables to weigh there. So if a magician determines that they will not branch off of their planned journey, no matter what happens, it's unlikely to take longer than expected due to factors within their control. However, no amount of focus can govern factors outside of one's control, such as a storm, throwing their ship off course, another natural disaster, or some other barrier. I really wish that I could make this list kind of have some indents. I'll need to look into how to do that with the actual scripting and whatnot, but for now it'll just be a big block of text. Okay, so let's go back to Keller's question here about what about impossible journeys? So if if you're stuck, like for example, what happens if while journeying from city A to city B you would have been killed? Like how long would it take for you to arrive there, or would you just never reappear? So instead what actually happens is, should a teleporter be destined to never arrive at their destination, they will instead appear there at a totally random amount of time from their departure. So it's basically like whatever underlying laws govern magic. When something unusual happens, they're kind of like, this person is stuck outside of the flow of time, and then they just like pop you back in. So for example, if you would have died, you might appear years later. You might appear, a century later. Or you might appear sooner than you would have arrived. It's kind of like the rules of nature just don't know what to do with you, because you become kind of like a metaphysical, tangent off of predictable logic. There are accounts of magicians reappearing far sooner than expected, but usually they appear long after they departed. So if you, I'm not sure if you're enjoying the stream, Keller, but if you continue to tune in, you'll learn at some point about what's coming up in Renato's story. We had just been reading him on the podcast today. We'll probably continue him in the next coming days. And there will actually be an account of this teleportation, which drastically kind of affects the story of him and his family. And so, lots of story potential there, and very kind of a unique system to try to think through. It's very in some ways seems counterintuitive to how you'd think it would work. All right, I think that's probably good for magic for now, so we'll save that. Let's put it in a category that it can be viewed in. Let's see, what would that be? Do we want a whole category for magic? Sure. And phenomenon. And then I'm actually gonna rename this page Magic overview. Oh, what happened to our heading there? All right, so we'll save that, and then we'll head back to here. And we're just gonna drop that into magic. So I also mentioned that there was some, places of magic and other sort of magical phenomenon. So, for example, in one of the places here, the Eye of Maga, as it's called, it is a lake that is called the Eye of Maga, but also the city has been named after the lake. And this lake has magical properties in that sometimes when someone is within the lake, they will be healed by something in the lake, and it can heal almost any ailment. We don't know if it can heal death; it's never done that, but there's been numerous accounts of it healing, diseases and illnesses for which there is no cure. But again, it's not like every time you go in there's some sort of healing, but rather there's something maybe drifting around within the lake that has healing properties, and you might encounter it. And so what happened over the course of time is that the rulers of the city walled off the lake, and they'll allow people to use it if they approve it, but they also bathe in it themselves every day. The rulers will always go in, even if they have a minor malady. It'll wash that away after a few days of trying to bathe in different spots of the lake. And no one really knows what's the cause of this. There's religious stories about who is Maga and this religious deity, and some people believe maybe a very powerful magician or a spirit of some kind died here, and that this is kind of the leftover magic of that being. But there's not really any clear answer yet on what causes that. There's also a grove near Fargrove, which kind of has like purging magical effects. It's a grove where if you carry a magical object, there is enchantment in this world. You can imbue objects with some elements of magic, but if you were to carry something that's enchanted into this grove, it would lose all of those magical properties. And so, there's not really an explanation for why that's a thing. It's just kind of there's some mystery within the world of Gethra, some mysterious places, and unusual properties. So that'll be something that, because so far with Gethra, my storytelling has been through the eyes of these characters. We haven't seen every area of this map in full detail and know everything about it. There's lots of stuff that still has yet to be discovered here. And so there's probably more places of magic, and there's certainly more places of magic beyond this section of map. As we continue working on the whole globe of Gethra, there's going to be lots of new things. There might be some very large magical places that have maybe a whole land that has a certain effect. That would be kind of interesting. All right, magic and phenomenon. All right, I'm gonna order these guys around a little bit. Let's see. Just making it a little easier to navigate by alphabetizing things. Oops. There we go. Great. Let's see here. Another message from Babacus. Slytherism believes that magicians are great spirits that have been reincarnated, or that have been incarnated into human form. Slither form. Cool. Also that. Well, let's see. Let's randomize first whether Slithers can do magic or not, because that's not something that has come up yet, at least, or if they can do the type of magic that we're talking about here. Let me just close that out. So we'll put a few different options here, and we'll give them a good shot, because I think if they're totally magicless, that would be kind of sad. But hey, welcome Xanderfell. Thanks. Lots of content here. And yeah, if you kind of scroll down into the About section, you can find a link to that wiki that I was just showing, our World Anvil wiki here. And my other sites, Lives of Gethra, is where a lot of the story resides. And I'm also releasing that as a podcast. So lots of stuff to check out here. And we just had a couple players actually create some of the Yeah, each segment of the stories is fairly short, and the wiki is a quick read right now because I've just started it this week. So, um, great. Okay, where were we at here? We're going to figure out about slithers. Can slithers perform magic? Yes, but they are less likely to be born with it. Yes, but they are more likely to be born with it. They have different magical gifts. And no. Yeah, nice. Yeah, World Anvil is super helpful for whether it's stories or games. You can all do all different organization there. Okay, so I think based on the fact that humans, after thousands of years, have still not encountered any proof that slithers have magic, and that's largely, like I said, there's a very small sample size, so it's not going to be insanely rare. But I think I'll make that option a little more likely. So I'll give it a couple options there, higher probability. And can slithers perform magic? Yes, but more likely. That one will be rare, and then it'll be also a little bit more common that they have, or a little more probable that they have different magical gifts. So give that a roll. Yep, 7. There we go. 5. Okay, so they can perform magic, but they're less likely to be born with it. And that's kind of cool for what you were saying, Babacus. That makes a lot of sense then, that why they would believe when a slither can perform magic, they're like, man, that must be one of the great spirits. Born into it. So let's go back to the slither religion. When a slither is rarely born with magic. Yeah, that's fair. That is, I'm a paying user on World Anvil just because I ran into that exact issue. I have a lot of different projects and ideas on the go at all times, so and I don't have all of them. I only have a couple on World Anvil because I don't really need them organized like a wiki all the time. But sometimes I've wanted to work on it here. When a slither is rarely born with magic, the tribes believe that a great spirit from the land has been incarnated into that individual. Yes. Interesting. I haven't heard of Kenka. I'll have to look that up sometime. Changes. There we go. All right. We got a lot of different tabs open here, so let's close some of this stuff out. All right. Now, before we wrap up here, I think I'm going to wrap up not too long from now, just because it's like I've been streaming from 2 a.m. until almost 5 a.m. here. So, yeah. So let's move on here, and we will check in on Nayar, because we did do a bunch of work figuring out more things for He Who Basks in Radiance, for Babacus. Right, yep. Yes, I am. I'm living in Ontario, so if you can't tell from my Canadian accent, but I'm also on this side of the country. But I don't mind staying up late once in a while. I'll probably, especially with Critical Role and some of those other big shows airing on Thursdays, that'll be the night that I am often online late, because I like to stay up and watch that anyway. So yeah, I will soon. I think I'm just gonna add in a couple little things here. I do have like I've talked about it on the stream a bit. I do have a day job, but the hours are flexible, so I can start a little later in the day tomorrow if I need, and it's not really a big issue. Kind of fortunate that way. That's why I was drawn to the job, being a creative person like I am. Yeah, so let's see. So we had Keller 7 coming up with Nayar here. and he's suddenly been left in power. But we didn't find out a lot about where he is. I mean, we know where He Who Basks in Radiance is because that's in, the Slithers roam in the deserts, and they aren't very well suited to living elsewhere yet. So we should try to figure out where in the world is Lord Nayar living. So I think we'll just copy this one because it's kind of already a list of the different zones. And we'll add in here and I think I'm going to play with the probabilities here a little bit just because different lands I already know which ones have like a feudal system where you might be a lord who could inherit power in that sense. Like, for example, in Numenacris, most power would be given from the empire as opposed to you inheriting into it, and it's more merit-based than lineage-based, right? So we'll keep that. So it could be certainly in East Radrogar, could be in West Radrogar, less common in the Torrent Shore, very common in Varnordos. So I'll add 2 more options there, and definitely common on the Great Isle. So there's our options for where Lord Nayar is based. Varnordos. So I'm not sure if you if you were here for that part, Calor, or not, but I had been writing a little bit about the city of Norris that was. So if you want to look that up on the wiki, you can read about. That's the capital city of Norris, and it touches a little bit on their culture. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I do enjoy mainly just my wife and I like watching it together. Uh, in the long run, you do kind of get they're professional entertainers and voice actors and stuff, so you get a little attached to their personalities once you get into it. But there's tons of great shows too. I've watched a few other ones here on Twitch and some on YouTube and stuff. So, all right. So Nayar hails from Varnordos. So here I'll leave this part up to you, Calor, if you'd like. We'll open up the map here. Oops, I actually want to shoot. Oh well. So we have Norris that was. There's also a couple other towns here. So Soros is another larger town. It's also where the treasury for this entire land is based in Soros. Port Dalus is another larger town, and then Bogtown and Targren are both smaller. They're little villages. But they would still have like a lord who oversees them. So if you wanted to. Cool. Yeah, that's a good source there, Xanderfell. Yeah. So yeah, Keller 7. Which kind of town would you see him ruling? Yeah, yeah. Saurus is an interesting one. If you're interested in reading any of the Lives of Gethra content, that character that was at the top of the list, Ferric. Ferric is from Saurus, but of course this is hundreds of years later than when Lord Nayar lived there. But it could be that they're distant relatives. We'll see what happens to Lord Nayar's story. Um, but yeah, so that city features heavily there. I'll add a page. Hopefully tomorrow I'll add a page on Soros and add in a bit of information. Yeah, there's certainly nobles. This area is like this red line here is the equator, so it's not quite like the medieval Europe kind of vibe. Much of this is jungle. There's regions of savanna and there's a desert. And so it's not quite as much the medieval Europe setting, but there are some areas that have bloodlines and old history, like the Empire of Norris that was. So there are some nobles there. There's some areas though where it's a little bit more like most of these places along the coast. These are just city states, so they would have a government